In this video, I'll be talking about AI and difficulty settings in 4X games. For people who have not played 4X games, I'll be going into some detail. Most of my examples being based around the Civilization series of games. I'll also talk about some aspects of 4X design, and I've tried to organise the video the best I can. I'll be bouncing around a bit, but it'll all come together at the end. I'll also be bringing in examples from other games which are not pure 4X games, such as the Total War franchise and the player versus environment real-time strategy game Infested Planet. The first part of the video will look at common criticisms of 4X games, and their AI in particular. The second part will look at different solutions. I'll start with saying that 4X games are one of my favourite video game genres. This is because they have a great amount of depth and an incredible amount of replayability. The game that got me into the genre was Civilization Revolution for the Xbox 360. While it was one of the simplest Civilization games, it was probably the first complicated strategy game I had ever played. I put an ungodly number of hours into this game, and it was one of the few games on Xbox for which I achieved 100% of the achievements. It kept drawing me back to try out different strategies and openers, and I kept testing myself to see how quickly I could achieve the different victory conditions. It was also one of the few strategy games that I tried to play multiplayer. I still remember my first gamer getting catapult rushed by someone playing as China and completely wiped out. Probably still one of the most humiliating gaming experiences in my life. When I got Civilization V for the PC, I was completely hooked, and is one of my most played games on Steam. Despite being rather feature weak when first released, the expansions brought in many fantastic features and fleshed it out into an incredible game. While it still has some rough edges, I place it alongside Endless Legend, another fantastic 4X game, as one of my favourite games of all time. Though despite my love of these games and the genre, there's still one issue that continues to annoy me and many other 4X gamers, and this is the AI. One of the problems behind having such complicated and open strategy games, with many different ways to play and victories to go for, is that it is incredibly difficult to program good AI to play them. While AI is generally improving, it is still a long way off what many gamers would like. 4X games are like giant complicated board games. Because of this, the AI and the player are playing the same game and using the same game mechanics against each other. However, the AI often struggles with essential parts of the game, such as combat. The fact that the AI is playing the same game as a human player makes it very obvious when they're making bad decisions. Unlike player versus environment games, where the AI often plays a very different game to the human player, so bad AI can be much better hidden. Civilization V and VI have a combat system, where each unit can only occupy one tile on the game map. Unlike the older Civilization games, which allowed units to be stacked on top of each other. Because of this, players would create the famous stacks of doom, moving all their units around on a single tile and destroying everything in their path. Although the AI could handle it reasonably well, this made the combat very simple and rather uninteresting. Having a single unit per tile mechanic added a new layer of strategy and provided many new ways players could get a military advantage over their opponents. Despite having a smaller army than your opponent, if you managed it well, you could still beat them. All this made the combat much more engaging, however it also made it much more complicated. Because of this increased complexity, the AI struggles immensely, and often sends streams of units to their doom, seemingly without much strategy or tactics. They also seem to struggle capturing cities. This is especially the case if the city has built walls. A defensive building in Civ VI, which fortifies a city's defense and grants them a ranged attack so they can combat enemies around the city. For more experienced players, this can make fighting and beating the AI at combat very easy, and at times, a boring experience. Often players commenting that even on the game's highest difficulties, it is still possible to beat the AI at war even when only using a tiny number of units, simply because the AI struggles organizing its armies. This is one complaint about the AI amongst many. It also struggles with the layout of its cities, often placing districts in unoptimal locations or building the wrong buildings at the wrong times. A common player reaction is to feel that the companies making 4X games are simply not trying hard enough, or that they simply don't care about developing their AI. An important thing to mention here is our expectations. I doubt that we would ever get a 4X game that an AI would be able to play as well as a human, at least not a complicated 4X game. Currently, there are two famous strategy games for which AI can beat top human players, and these are Go and chess. While these are complicated games that have many different strategies and ways to play, they're still a very long way away from Civilization or Endless Legend. To get around the fact that an AI will not be able to use all the game's different features as well as a human player, what game designers usually do is give the AI bonuses on the higher difficulties to help compensate for some of the bad and unoptimal decisions that they make while they play. This seems to be the best way of dealing with the problem, because while the ideal solution is having an AI that can play as well as a human player on its own, this will require an incredible amount of time, money, and also processing power for the computers running the game. While still working continually to improve the AI, throwing on bonuses is a great way to help the AI keep up with the player, and allows them to still provide some kind of challenge despite making some optimal decisions. However, I feel that the most common way of doing this might not be the best way to approach the problem. I'll try to explain why, and what some modders have come up with as an alternative, which after playing with, I personally believe is a much better way of giving the AI bonuses in a 4X game. The most common way of giving the AI a bonus is through a percentage bonus to the AI's yields. For example, in Civilization VI, the AI on King difficulty will get an 8% bonus increase on their science, culture and faith yields. On the Emperor difficulty, these will be 16%. While this does work to a degree, on the very highest difficulties, the bonuses are so large that they can completely skew how you play the game, especially when the higher difficulties, such as Immortal and Deity, also give the AI free startling settlers, warriors and builders, giving them a much stronger early game and start to the player. I feel that one of the most common reasons players complain about the AI cheating is in some cases how obvious it is. This is especially true when giving the AI additional starting settlers and warriors. While it can be easy to miss the AI simply getting extra science or culture thrown their way, it is simply impossible to ignore when by the time of your second settler and ready to expand, the AI next to you is already on their 4th or 5th city. Also, as mentioned before, bonuses such as these completely skew how you play the game, and massively reduce the number of different viable strategies you can use. An example of this is the famous 4-city tour tradition opener for Civilization V Brave New World. It was a strategy which was widely regarded as the optimal way to play Civilization V. This was because it was one of the best ways to beat the game on the highest difficulty setting. The strategy involved building only 4 cities, focusing on the tradition social policy tree, building libraries in your cities, and getting the National College built as soon as possible. The main focus was on science. The tradition policy tree gave you 3 buildings in your first 4 cities, including 4 aqueducts, which are the buildings in the game which provide a massive bonus to population growth. The libraries give an increase in science depending on the population of your cities, and the National College giving a huge 50% increase to your science income in the city in which you build it. The idea was that these 4 cities would give you such a large science advantage over your opponents that this would carry you for the rest of the game. Another advantage was how simple it was to do. Only founding 4 cities meant limited interactions with the other players around you. This meant you could largely ignore the huge bonuses the AI received. Because of this, it was a strategy you could use in pretty much any game you played, regardless of the difficulty you were playing. What's interesting here is to compare this to how people play Civilization V multiplayer. Here, people would be playing against other human players who would not be getting the bonuses the AI got. If a strategy was the most optimal way to play the game, then you'd expect to see it used all the time in the game's multiplayer scene. While it was still seen as a strong strategy, the top multiplayer games of Civ V would often go for a wide approach, favouring the high production you were able to get. Here players would often focus on the Liberty Tree, and founded many more than 4 cities. The advantage here was that having more cities provided players with much higher production. This higher production would allow you to get a much larger army than someone focusing on only 4 cities, giving a big advantage militarily. Because of how often multiplayer games were decided militarily, this was seen as a strong contender to the 4-City Tradition opener. The reason the 4-City Tradition opener became widely known as the best way to play the game wasn't that it was truly the best, but was one of the few ways you could work around the insane bonuses the AI got on the higher difficulties, specifically during the early game. We will now look at something which isn't to do with the AI, but the design of 4X games themselves. They all have a common flaw, and different games try different ways to tackle it. A main flaw of 4X games is how they are inherently snowbally. Once a player starts doing well, it is hard to design game mechanics around slowing them down. More success often leads to even more success, more cities, production, science, and culture. Another common complaint people have about 4X games is that they have a very weak endgame. Many players saying that they quit and restart most of their games halfway through. Part of the reason is snowballing. There gets to a point in the game where you're sure of your own victory. The only problem is that there can still be a long way to go to get there. This is especially true if you're going for one of the peaceful victory conditions. Sometimes you can be sure of your victory and be in a completely unbeatable position only halfway through the length of the game. An example here is where I was playing Rome in Civ VI. I had very quickly expanded and conquered my entire continent, getting myself into a very strong position by about the medieval era. It was a game where I was going for a culture victory, since I had never achieved one so far during my time playing Civilization VI. The game was basically me hitting next turn button for hours, while my guaranteed victory slowly got closer and closer, with the AI being completely incapable of slowing me down or stopping me. Trying to stop and limit snowballing is very important to 4X game design. However, you need to be careful in how you choose to do it. Civ V tried to use global happiness as a mechanic to slow people down, also introducing national wonders that give bonuses to players who focus around having a smaller number of more highly developed cities. Each citizen and city you had would produce unhappiness, and so you needed enough happiness to allow your empire to grow. Not having enough happiness would provide big negative effects to your empire, reducing your yield dramatically, and if the unhappiness got bad enough, causing rebels to spawn. Having more cities and more population was very important to the strength of your civilization, making happiness one of the most important resources. It meant you often had to decide whether you wanted a few highly populated cities or many cities with smaller populations, it being very difficult to do both. The national wonders required you to own a copy of a specific building in each of your cities to then build a stronger version of this building. For example, needing a library in each of your cities to build a national college, providing a large boost to your science, or needing a coliseum in each of your cities to build a Circus Maximus, providing a large boost to your happiness. The problem was that this ended up locking players into 2 very different playstyles, with little flexibility in between. If you wanted to take advantage of the national wonders, then it was better to focus on a small number of cities. If you wanted to have many cities, then you'd need to have enough of them to make up for the fact that you'd be missing out on the bonuses the national wonders provide, which meant having a lot. If you went any way between these 2 options, then you're playing at a big disadvantage. And because expanding and having many cities is often more inherently difficult, especially when having to fight wars against some very heavily boosted AI players with a ton of early game bonuses, most players instead opted to take the 4-city route. One of the reasons the 4-city route was so popular was because of how powerful the National College was. The fact that the bonus to science was a 50% increase, and that you would also get a great population growth boost by going tradition, which as stated earlier also increases your science, meant that the combination gave you not just a slight science advantage over your opponents, but a huge one. This was one way players sought to get around the bonuses the AI got. A common statement about Civ 5 is that science is king. So by focusing entirely on boosting your science as high as you could still sail past the AI on the tech tree despite all of their bonuses. Early on in the game, they would still be beating you in science, but with a carefully managed build order, by the mid-game, you'd start to overtake them, and then start to snowball. The game was still based around snowballing past your AI opponents, only that their bonuses reduced the different viable ways to play. This led to high-level players getting together and discussing which difficulty was the most fun. Players often looking to the Emperor difficulty as one that you could still use a variety of different playstyles to beat. The higher difficulties often not necessarily being harder once you know what you are doing, but being much less flexible in how you can play. As a game designer who is designing 4X games, this must be difficult to see. There are games where one of the main selling points is the enormous variety of different ways to play them. Once you get to the point that people are sharing different build orders online and stating that you absolutely must get this national wonder by this turn, it must be slightly heartbreaking. All the difficulty settings have done is taken a highly flexible game with many different ways to play and pushed it down a single route where people simply follow a list they found on the internet. Most of the early game are already being decided, and players simply going through the motions, rather than interacting with the game and the experience. From early on in the development of Civ VI, the lead designer Ed Beach made statements that suggested that getting rid of this build order mentality, which developed around beating the higher difficulties, was one of his key aims. Creating two different tech trees, so science is not as much the king as it was, and introducing a Eureka system, which would reward players for interacting with the game world around them, rather than just following a list of things to do by certain turns they got off the internet. The way the Eureka system worked was that you would complete half the research of a technology or a civic if you did something in-game that triggered its booster. This can be things such as settling a city on the coast to get a booster for sailing, or killing 3 barbarians to get yourself a booster for bronze working. This worked by giving your civilization bonuses towards the things that you are actually doing in-game, making advancing through the technology trees more about interacting with the environment rather than focusing on build orders or pre-planned strategies. There have been topics on Civ forums where deity players who play the game on the hardest difficulty, say that they often feel frustrated, feeling that they couldn't get things done by the turns they wanted them to be done, or that they always feel unfocused while playing, still applying the same way of thinking that they used in previous Civilization games to this new game, whereby, if they were sure to hit certain buildings being built by certain turns, then they know they're doing okay, and that they're still on track to victory. Although everyone enjoys playing their games in different ways, the things they are complaining about, I feel are some of Civ VI's greatest successes. However, despite the advantages of the new Eureka system, the AI bonuses are still done in the same way as Civilization V, still giving them a huge early game advantage, which rather than making the game substantially harder, instead reduce the different routes you can take to get yourself into the snowballing position. The end game still being boring, since once you are in the snowballing position, it's still just about hitting end turn and cleaning up what's left of your opponents, the AI still being incapable of stopping you or slowing you down. So while Civ VI managed to get around part of the problem with weakening the build order mentality and encouraging players to interact with the game world, it didn't fix the underlying problem that led to players developing the build order mentality in the first place, which is how to work around the bonuses the AI got. Looking a bit more now at snowballing. If one of the main problems that makes the endgame of 4X games boring is the snowballing, then how can you deal with this problem? One series of games that is similar but not identical to 4X games are the Total War series. Like more traditional 4X games, they have the same problem of snowballing. That once you get to a certain size and power, the game simply becomes about wiping out whoever is left without any real threat or challenge. The way that these games try to deal with the snowball is by throwing in one huge final challenge. Your empire will go into civil war, or there will be a huge army spawned on one side of the map full of high-tier units that'll head straight for you. Another has all the remaining AI players in the game all joining forces together against you once you get to a certain power. However, while these work for the Total War series, they don't translate well into Civilization. Having a player's empire break into civil war would be incredibly frustrating, and having a huge army appear out of nowhere would completely go against the idea of the game. Some older versions of Civ, and Civ VI with the summer 2017 patch, had it so when the player got close to a victory condition, all the remaining AI players would declare war against them. However, this was heavily criticised, as making the diplomacy side of the game pointless. What's the point of making good friends with one of the AI, if when you get close to a victory, they would turn against you? It also brings up an argument about what the point of the AI is. Should it be to beat the game themselves, or to provide the player with a good experience? Which is another topic people could talk about for hours. To truly prevent snowballing in a 4X game, you would need to have some way for the AI to keep up with the player to remain a challenge even after the player has got into a snowballing position. However, to also do it without heavily reducing the player's choices in how they wish to play the game, or in a way which is incredibly frustrating to the player, such as suddenly losing control of half their empire. Here is where I put forward the solution, which I have found to make the game more enjoyable. There are two mods, one for Civilization VI and one for Endless Legend, which change how the bonuses are provided to the AI. Rather than giving each difficulty a flat bonus rate, which often provides them with a huge early game advantage, these mods change it so that the bonuses the AI receives increases as the game goes on. In the Civ VI mod, the bonuses are dependent on the era the AI players are in, while the Endless Legend mod changes the bonuses depending on how many turns of the game have been played. This means that in the early game, the AI will have much lower bonuses than the usual game difficulties. This allows the player much more flexibility in how they wish to play the game. But come late game, the AI will have much higher bonuses that still allow them to compete and provide some kind of challenge to a player who is snowballing. In fact, after playing with these mods for some time, it seems incredible to me that this is not the standard way that 4X games handle difficulty, since it seems to deal quite well with the two main issues the genre has. Early game AI bonuses hugely reducing the player options, and the game becoming boring once the player gets into a snowballing position. If you want to try out these mods, and I highly recommend you doing so, the one for Civ VI is called Smoother Difficulty, and it was made by Rush Second on Civ Fanatics, and you can find it here. One for Endless Legend is called Progressive Difficulty, and was made by Enchanteur, and it can be found on the Endless Legend Steam Workshop here. I can talk for hours about great, really close games I've had while using these mods. Games which would have originally become boring after the midway point. Some of my best experiences have been using cunning plans to slow down and prevent the AI achieving one of the victory conditions, while I am also close to achieving one of mine. Despite still getting myself into a very strong position early on in the game stayed interesting all the way to the very last turn. Another option, which doesn't require mods, is one which is also not industry standard when designing 4X games. In fact, you can only do it in Civ VI by playing a hot seat game, where to play single player, you can set yourself as the only human player, and in Endless Legend, it is not possible at all. The aim here is to create another snowballing opponent to provide a challenge to a player who's snowballing themselves. The way to do this is to manually set the difficulty of the AI players, and setting 1 to be much higher difficulty setting than the others. Commonly in 4X games, you can only set a single difficulty for all of your AI opponents, and this seems like a huge missed opportunity. Often, when all the AI players are the same difficulty, they bounce off each other, without any single one of them gaining an upper hand. To create an opposing snowballing AI player, you would want one of the AI opponents to beat the others around them, so they can provide a late game challenge to the human player. Also, since you will not know what Civ this super AI is playing, it adds another layer of excitement into the game. Often by the midway point, it gets obvious. But before then, you're always thinking about the possibility of it being the AI that has started next to you, or the one you just declared war on. While I feel these are very good and simple solutions to the problems I have presented, I also want to talk about other options and different games I felt have handled AI opponents well. This is all personal preference from here on in, as I highly doubt I'd ever see these kinds of huge changes. One game I want to talk about here is Infested Planet, which is a fantastic game and one that I highly recommend. The first thing to mention is that this is definitely not a 4X game. The best way to describe it is a player versus environment real-time strategy. Here the AI is playing a very different game to the human player. The player is the Marines, with advanced technology and firepower, and the AI are the alien swarm the players have to beat. The main thing I want to talk about is the adaptive bonuses the AI receive in the game, where the bonuses it receives depends on how you play. On the map, there are alien hives. Each alien hive the player destroys leaves an area on the map they can capture. When they capture this point, they gain extra resources. We can compare this to 4X games, where you gain in power the more cities you conquer. Like 4X games, the inherent design should present the same problem as snowballing, your resources increasing with the more points you capture. However, here is where the game does something very interesting. For each point you capture, the AI gains a mutator. These are bonuses that the alien swarm gets. The game assesses how you are playing, and then gives the alien swarm a bonus that is designed to counter your playstyle. If you are using a small number of high-tier units, then the alien swarm will get a mutator, which allows them to periodically attack you with clones of your soldiers. This means your playstyle is directly countered, and that you should swap to using defensive towers and long-ranged artillery, where your soldiers' clones will be less powerful. If you do change your playstyle to this, then the next swarm upgrade might be Infestation, where if one of your defensive towers or artillery dies, it becomes infected, where the aliens can start using it against you. These are two similar examples, but I feel they present the concept quite well. The game has tons of them, and they allow the game to continue to be interesting and challenging all the way up to the last alien hive. You constantly need to tweak your playstyle and strategy to the new mutators you are facing. The main reason I brought this up is it is a way of providing difficulty that is based entirely around AI bonuses. It is just done in a very creative and effective way. Obviously, 4X games are much more complicated than Infested Planet. It would require a lot of work to implement an adaptive bonus system into a 4X game, but still much less work than perfect AI. What I imagined is using a per-era mutator given to the AI depending on how you are playing, but also depending on the Civ the AI is playing. For example, if the AI is playing a warmonger Civ, such as the Aztecs, then maybe the mutator bonus they would get for that era is a reduction to the cost of military units, or a large reduction in the amenity warmonger penalty they face. If the Civ is one that specializes in building wonders, such as China, then maybe the AI can get an era mutator that focuses around building wonders. Maybe here, if the player has built lots of wonders and are beating the AI in the wonder race, the AI can get a warmonger mutator bonus allowing cheaper units, their behavior swapping to trying to invade the player and capture his cities. If the player is themselves going full warmonger, then maybe the AI around him can get a mutator bonus, allowing for much cheaper walls and encampments in their cities. A big advantage of this system is that it'll also make the world feel more alive. Another common complaint you sometimes hear about 4X games is that the world feels too static. Having the AI directly respond to how the player is playing in a deeper way than the warmonger penalty already seen in the game would help deal with that. It would also again help combat the build-on mentality and encourage players to further engage with the game world around them. There is actually a Civ V mod that plays around with adaptive difficulty, and this mod is called Buffed AI for Brave New World. It was made by Glider1 on the Civilization Fanatics forum, and you can find it here. It works on buffing yields like the base game difficulty, but rather than basing it on the game difficulty chosen at the beginning of the game or the era the AI players are in, it is instead based on how the AI is doing relative to the player. In its final version, if the AI was doing equally well compared to the player in the main yields, such as science, production or culture, then it didn't get any bonuses. However, when the player started to overtake it, it would jump up the difficulties until it caught up. It was a very interesting way of providing AI bonuses, and it was reactive to the player. It was also a great way of combating player snowballing, and in many ways was more effective than per-era bonuses. It succeeded in providing a constant challenge to the player all the way through the game, but it struggled in that it reduced the player's variety in how they could play. If only one yield was above the AI, then they would get the difficulty jump, improving all the AI's yields, meaning it was better for the player to not specialize in anything and to try and keep his science, production and culture all close to each other. Still, it is a fantastic mod and one I recommend, especially to players who are curious to see how it affects the game and the AI difficulty. Of all the different approaches mentioned in this video, this is the one that combats player snowballing most effectively. It's time to start wrapping up the video. The main point I wish to convey is how much the experience of the game can be changed by playing around with the bonuses the AI receives. I know many gamers are not a fan of mods, feeling they're getting something unofficial and low quality. However, by taking the issue of the AI into our own hands, we can shape the game experience we want. It also allows us to explore different possibilities. While messing around with the deeper AI programming is a very complicated and messy process, playing around with difficulty settings is comparatively much simpler. It is the best tool we as players have at our disposal to improve the experience of playing against the AI, at least until the DLL is released, which will allow much more in-depth programming of the AI code. It also opens up an incredible amount of possibilities in what kind of bonuses we want the AI to receive. It is an area I feel has been massively underexplored by both 4X game designers and modders. I'll post links to all the different mods I mentioned in this video below for anyone who wishes to try them out. I also extend my many thanks to those modders for hugely improving my game experience. And of course thanks to the game designers for making such fantastic and deep strategy games. Many thanks for watching, and happy civing.